Trump is scheduled to give a news conference Wednesday morning. Now, you may remember he canceled the one that he said he was going to have in mid-December. It was supposed to spell out how he would deal with his various conflicts of interest. Now, there will even be more to talk about. That as Trump has just named son-in-law Jared Kushner as a senior advisor. That'll put anti-nepotism rules also to the test. On Wednesday, it will be a general news conference, and it's unclear whether or not the president-elect will even talk about how he will separate his businesses from his new job, you know, the one running the entire country. I guarantee he'll be asked. Whether or not he answers a different question. Well, a new piece in Politico, it's got some suggestions for Mr. Trump. Here, just some of them. One, take Trump Incorporated public. Or you could set up a blind or even half-blind trust. You could also appoint a corporate monitor, or you could leave it to his two adult sons, as well as maybe even building a firewall. Well, Darren Samuelson is co-author of that very piece. He's senior White House reporter at Politico, and he's kind enough to join us now. First of all, your expectations for Wednesday at the end of the press conference, do you think we're finally going to have some clarity on this, or do you think we're going to say, we're a week and change here from this guy getting sworn in, and we have no idea how we're really going to address this?
I think we'll have some clarity from where we sit today. We'll have him formally discussing this. I hope that we'll see some paper that his aides will actually circulate the legal agreement that he has reached. No indication yet we're actually going to get those kinds of materials, but our fingers are crossed that we will at least get a little bit more detail than what he's so far provided, really via Twitter.
You laid out 10 different ways that he could address this. Let's do the first ones off the top, which I don't think will happen. One is he could take his company public here, and obviously then you'd have shareholders, then you'd have a board, there'd be oversight. Unlikely as best. Everybody suggested the cleanest way to do this, and with precedent, is to set up a blind trust. But again here, I would be shocked, wouldn't you, that Trump would go that route?
Yeah, he has shown no indication that he's going to be selling off the assets or putting them in some sort of place where he wouldn't know where his investments are, where his money is. His children are going to be in charge, Eric and Donald Jr. He's indicated that as well. His sons are traveling around the world right now. They were in Uruguay. Eric was last week talking about one of the buildings that's going up there. So at this point, we have no indication it's going to be any kind of a blind trust like we saw with the Clintons, where they were not aware of where their assets are. We know where Donald Trump's assets are. His name is on so many buildings and golf courses around the world. By all accounts, he's not going the route that previous presidents have gone.
I'll give a couple others that you mentioned the piece. Again, I find these unlikely. One would be that there'd be a half-blind trust. But in this particular case, as you said, you got things like this would be considered a gift, which obviously would be subject to taxation. The same thing with capital gains. We know President-elect doesn't like to pay taxes here, so that probably won't be on the list. And also the idea of an independent trust. But then you'd have somebody without the last name Trump here that in effect would be the go-between between Donald Trump and his old company against something he hasn't been crazy about.
Yeah, these are all other iterations of the same blind trust concept. At this point in time, again, we have no indication Donald Trump is going that way. These are certainly suggestions that have been put out there by experts who are offering Donald Trump ways to maybe avoid, what is going to be drip, drip, drip problems throughout the course of his administration if he doesn't go any of these, more aggressive routes.
Darren, I saw Mike Mukasey, former AG, in effect making the argument for Sessions to be the new Attorney General. But I did think it was interesting how much FaceTime he's been getting, because you mentioned in your piece he could be somebody that could be put on as a formal monitor. The premise being that there'd be a person or persons that on a monthly or a quarterly basis would make sure that none of the business dealings of Trump enterprises would be being advantaged by policy coming out of the administration. That one, to me, I don't know if it really passes the smell test, but I could see Trump at least proffering that up as a way he'd be willing to go, where he gets to pick the people that will put a face saying everything's fine here, nothing to see.
Exactly. This is one that I've been hearing for a while. Newt Gingrich, the former House Speaker, one-time Donald Trump vice presidential hopeful, has said that to me a couple of times. He's talked about it in NPR interviews, the idea of Mike Mukasey's and former attorneys general, other former senior Justice Department experts, other judges that Donald Trump could tap. But he would be picking who they are, it seems like, under the scenario that Newt Gingrich has spelled out. And I don't know about the transparency on this group, whether we'd actually get to see them meeting in public. That's probably a big question is, Donald Trump creating a conflict board that Donald Trump has created and meets in secret and doesn't necessarily tell us, what they're seeing and what they think might be potential conflicts.
And I've heard people say, hey, he already said he's going to leave it to Donnie Jr. and Eric, but there's one thing with leaving it to them, as you say in your piece, they don't have the scratch here to pay for the company outright. You'd have to bring in investors or borrow money, which again invites potential conflicts. And more than that, they've showed either zero willingness or consciousness that the things they've done, the meetings they've sat in on, the people that they've attempted to curry business, have all but confirmed the worst suspicions here that they'll do anything to trade on the name here to try and increase the bottom line. That won't work either, right?
It's asking for a lot of trouble, no doubt about it. The way that they've been going around their meetings with Trump business partners who have connections to the foreign governments that their father is going to be negotiating with and working with and making American diplomacy with. Those are all of the conflict of interest questions that could bubble up. Who knows which problem it might be that ultimately leads to hearings in Congress and leads to the problems that we might be talking about are 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. But certainly the two sons taking over the business the way it seems like they're going to does set them up for the problems ahead. As you point out, they've had some meetings with people around the world already. People have been coming into Trump Tower who have been organized, meetings have been organized with the sons' involvement. The sons obviously are part of the transition, interviewing cabinet secretaries. The possibilities seem to be kind of endless at this moment in time about what kinds of problems could come out going forward.
Darren, what the heck do they do about the Washington Hotel? Because in about a week and change, he's going to be both the landlord and the tenant. And by definition, when we talk about emoluments clause and all the rest, you can't be basically getting gifts from foreigners. How can this possibly work? And as a broader issue, for people who think that, oh, you're just banging on the new guy, he had 2 years to plan for this, and we're scrambling now to come up with some cockamamie plan that everybody should have seen coming if he really thought he was going to be president.
A lot of people that I speak with don't necessarily think that Donald Trump thought he was going to win this election, and so he didn't put the time and effort into the planning of how they were going to untangle things, and nor did they really think about all of the different possibilities that could come down the road. Politically, I will tell you that people who supported Donald Trump don't necessarily think this is a problem. They think that Donald Trump is, the businessman that they voted for, and that's why he's in the White House. And politically, they think that they're going to get a pass on this one. We will see. And I think for the Republicans in Congress and people who are going to be agitating for more oversight and more hearings, and if the emoluments clause does come up because guests start to stay in these buildings and this gets to be seen as a gift to the Trump administration, really the only time that this politically could sting Donald Trump is if Democrats were in some level of power that they could force impeachment proceedings on Donald Trump, or if the Republicans really started to hear it back home and decided that this was an issue that ultimately was something that they wanted to take the president on.
It'll be a fascinating Wednesday morning. Darren, thank you so much for a few. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, we're not even remotely done with the latest issues and drama du jour in the world of Trump. Coming up next, at the Golden Globes, Meryl Streep, she went directly after the president-elect here last night, saying that Trump was not only unfit, but unbecoming. Well, as is his way, Donald Trump fired right back on Twitter. Not surprising necessarily, but what he said is surprising even for him.